We're going to be covering a video on my biggest losing and winning trade of February. We just ended the month of February, so I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about my biggest loser and my biggest winner. And although one trade is a loser and one trade is a winner, they are both valid trades. They are both good trades. And so it's good to talk about that and share that not every trade, regardless of whether or not it's a good trade or a bad trade, is going to be a winner, right? So let's talk about my biggest losing trade of the month. That was in the S&P. There was a larger 50% long here, 38.41. It's a daily 50% long. We traded a 50% long inside of there, 39.12. Target completes around 40.93, and we eventually traded a 40.55 quarter. So going into an hourly chart, there was a 50% long inside of here as well. And that was the 41.2375. Now, I actually had this trade. So this was on Thursday. No, my loser was Tuesday. So Tuesday was my loser in the S&P. Now, what happened though, so 41.2375, the 14th was this losing trade, but it's interesting because I also had a winning trade before the loser. So we can see 41.2375, that level that we just talked about, comes into play, and we actually get a great move here. So I actually got my first and second target. I took two contracts in the S&P. I entered 41.25 to go long, and my stop was 41.05. So I had a 20-point first target and a 40-point second target for 60 points total. That actually completed in the S&P. And then I went ahead and took the retest trade. Same thing, 41.25, I got long. But on that second trade, I ended up losing. So it's interesting that my biggest losing trade was one that was a winner. I made 60 points total, and then I ended up losing 40 points. So I still did plus 20 overall on the S&P, but that retest was a loser, and that was my largest loser of the month. And coincidentally, it's kind of funny and just ironic that on the winning side, I had my Nasdaq trade was my biggest trade, and I actually had a loser before that winner. So it's kind of funny how that works out. But again, the S&P, what we end up having here is just a nice sequence of longs starting from the daily time frame. There's this 50% long 38.41. Inside of there, there's a 39.12. Completes the target, next 50% long 40.55 quarter. And then inside of that 40.55 quarter, there was a 50% long of 41.2375. And like I said, I was able to get long on that first test for 20 and 40 points for 60 points total. That retest ends up being a stop out for minus 20 on two contracts. So I make 60 points, risking 40 total, and then I end up losing 40 points. So I'm still up 20 points overall on the S&P. But that was my biggest losing trade of the month. And you can tell it was a good setup, right? I followed my rules. I was patient. I was following the long sequence. And so sometimes there's not much else you can do, right? We just pull the trigger and sometimes you end up losing. That's the game that we play. So I'm okay with that loser. And that's what I did this past weekend was review all these trades. And I also I use traderview.com. Very useful. And basically, I import my data from my brokerage, and then I can add tags to all these trades. And so I'll add, like for this was a 50% long. It's a full traditional setup. And so what I'll do at the end of the month is look at all my tags and see which setups are trading the best, which setups are trading the worst in terms of win percentage, risk reward, profit factor. And so that allows me to understand where are my best trades. What trade's going to put the most risk on? Which trade should I put the least risk on? And in some cases, if I need to cut a setup out of my playbook, do I need to do that as well? So that data is so useful and so insightful. But I'm very okay with this being my biggest loser of the month. You know, I follow my rules. It's a good trade. Ends up working the first time around, second test, not so much. And it actually did end up holding after it broke the 61.8. So I got stopped out. Then it ended up running higher, retested the next day, same reaction, but then it eventually did end up breaking down. So moving to the NASDAQ, this is now my biggest long, my biggest winning trade here. Also long trade for sure. This was a really big trade that I had, my biggest trade of the year actually, as far as like trading the minis goes and the risk involved. But anyways, we had a 50% long 11,659 half. We completed the target here of 176. We take that next 50% long and we had a 956 half trade. That completes the target as well. What ended up happening was we failed this 50% long as a 12,410. That ended up failing, and we actually traded the same setup from before to its new high. And so from 277 quarter, 12,277 quarter, there was a long sequence in here that I was able to trade in the NASDAQ. So moving to the hourly time frame, we can see that there was a 50% long here. And actually, I think it may have been just before that. I'm going to drop down to a 5 minute, and we'll maximize this sell here. That may have actually been how it traded. I forget the news, but this is the setup that I was just looking at. So it's a 12,465 quarter. And we can see here that we trade this level. It takes some time. This is actually the day that I had that S&P trade. This is the 14th of February. This is where I had that losing trade in the S&P. But what I'm doing right now with the NASDAQ is just observing. I'm trying to see if we hold this or if we fail. What I'm thinking is if we break below 412, we could retest this larger 50% long on the hourly time frame. If this ends up holding to its target, then what I would like to do is take the next 50% long and trade that. And if that were to fail, I'll trade the full 50% long too. So what ends up happening here in the NASDAQ, and again, it's ironic because my largest losing trade was after a winning trade. And in this case, my largest winning trade was actually after a losing trade. So I got long 12,595. I got long 12,595. I was front running this 50% level, and I ended up being stopped out. I lost 45 points per contract. I lost 90 points total on this trade that I took in the NASDAQ. But immediately when I got into this trade of 595, my thoughts that I have during a trade isn't, oh gosh, I hope this works. I'm in this trade now. Please work, please work. Or if this doesn't work, what am I going to do? Really, the reality is that you're in a trade and now it's either going to hit your targets or you're going to get stopped out. And so, what I'm trying to figure out is where could the market go from here? If this setup holds, where could it likely run to? And if this setup fails, where can price again run to? And so, my thought process was simply, okay, I'm in this long trade, but if we end up failing, I need to get ready to take a long again because the full 50% long could come into play. So going to a 15 minute, so you can see this more clearly, what I end up drawing is that same setup from before, just drawn to the new high. And that is a 12,518. So I get stopped out. I lost 45 points, a contract. I lost 90 points total on that first trade. Then we come to 518. I got long 523. So 12,523, I limit long, and I go ahead and I get 70 points as a first target. My risk on this trade was 70 points. It was a lot of risk, my largest trade in terms of risk for the year so far with using the minis. So 70 point stop, 70 point first target. And my second target then is typically two times risk, right? So that first trade I tried to do in the S&P, I was risking 20 points. So my first target was 20, second target's 40. In this case, my second target is then 140 points. But what I just said before, right? What I'm doing when I'm in a trade is analyzing where could the market go from here if we hold or if we fail. So what I'm thinking is if this setup fails, if we break below 450s, then we could head lower and retest this hourly 50% long of 277 quarter. If we break below 453, we'll likely retest 277. If the setup holds, I need to be aware of the opposing short. And that was a 644. So I noticed this short setup was close to coming in play. And so what I did, again, I entered 523 and 140 points is my second target. That would be a 663. So 20 points above this 50% short. And I just thought to myself, is it worth risking being up 120 points and then giving it all up for just 20 more? Probably not, right? So I'm up 120. If I get to this 50% level, is it worth the extra 20? And I decided that it wasn't. So I exited 20 points earlier than my second target simply because of this resistance. And so not letting the ego get in the way, not chasing the dollars, right? It's just about the action in the market, the levels, what could be resistance, what could be support, and making sure that I'm exiting at the right place. Now, ultimately, of course, this would have ended up hitting that second target, but I'm still okay with this exit because it makes sense. It's at an opposing resistance level. It could have held, it just dropped. And why, when you're up 120 points, why go for the extra 20 when you're already up 120? So I exited 120, got 70 on the first, so I got 190 points total on this trade. Remember, I lost 90 on the first trade of the day in the NASDAQ, so I ended up being up 100 points on the day when you include the loser and the winner for the day. But this was my largest winning trade of the month. And again, with minis, my largest risk that I put on in this NASDAQ trade. And then ultimately, we did end up, it wasn't clean, but the short did actually hold and we broke 453. And like I said, when you break these levels, you're likely going to run into the next level that we have. And so we came right into 277, like we were just talking about. And so that's when Fibonacci can be not only a tool for entering and exiting and managing your trades, it's also a fantastic tool for objective analysis and just understanding where can the market likely go. And it makes it so much more simple than trying to always guess or make these predictions when you can just look at the price action and just see what's holding and what's failing. Very, very simple. So that was just a review of my biggest loser of the month, my biggest winner of the month. So again, S&P, I had a winning trade. I got 20 and 40 points, so I made 60. Then I had my largest loser of the month. I lost 40 points total, 20 points per contract in the S&P. And on that day specifically was up 20 points in it for the winner and the loser. The NASDAQ, I had my largest winning trade of the month. And funny enough, I had a loser before that. So I lost 90 points total, 45 points a contract before that loser. And then I got long the NASDAQ and I got 70 and 120 for 190 points total on that trade. And then again on the day, it was it was 100 points total. When you take 190 minus 90, it's 100 points. But again, it was just kind of funny to see that my largest losing trade was after a winner, and then my largest winning trade was after a loser. But it goes to show that you never know what the market's going to do. You just trade your setups, you pull the trigger, and what happens, happens. And that's the name of the game. But if you like this, please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and I'll throw some more content out there soon. But take care, and hopefully you guys can crush March.